Hello and welcome Star Wars Unlimited fans. I'm Justin with Gamers Guild USA. Last week, we covered an in-depth meta-analysis on aggro decks. You can go ahead and check out the video up here or down in the links below. This week, we're going to be covering everything mid-range. What is mid-range? What makes it tick? What are the top meta decks in mid-range? As well as some spicy alternatives to help you beat the meta. With Planetary Qualifiers right around the corner, I want to make it my job to help get you guys prepared. Today, like I said, we're going to be covering mid-range. All the decks we'll be talking about will be in the description below. Let's get to it. Before we get to the deck list, I want to give you a little primer on what makes mid-range mid-range, what are some of its strengths and weaknesses, and why you should bring it to your next Planetary Qualifier. Mid-range is really most of the decks that you're going to see. It's everything that's not the two aggro leaders that we talked about last week, and everything basically not trying to play for the complete late game in Star Wars Unlimited. So really when I say mid-range, I'm saying most of the things that you're going to see. What makes mid-range good is that it has the ability to kind of flex all over the place. You can build more towards the early game if you want to be more aggressive or counter-aggressive decks. You can build more towards the mid-game to try to take control in the mid-game. And really you can build any way you want to at the end of your curve by either going really tall to beat other mid-range decks or building really good card economy so that you can fight against other control decks. Its biggest strength, I believe, is that flexibility and the fact that you can really tune it every single week based on what you see, based on what you expect. It has options. I mean, every color has options all the way across the curve. So really, you know, the card lists are your oyster. Do with them what you will based on what you expect to see. But I also believe this is mid-range's biggest weakness in the fact that it's so flexible. If you don't have the right option at the right time, if you draw the top end of your curve at the beginning of the game, if you draw your mid-range curve at the end of your game, or even your aggressive part of your curve at the end of your game, you can really run into some tough spots because you are not focused on winning the game in a certain place. You're trying to stretch yourself too thin. So really, I think it can be effective, and sometimes a little bit of luck is involved based on where along the curve you draw your cards. But strength and weakness being the same thing, I think really it's just down to the odds and if you like your deck. Now let's get into our first deck list. And I think everybody knows what this deck list is by now. Han 1 Yellow. I feel like everyone's gotten a taste of Han from the first set. A lot of it was Han Green. I don't think that Han Yellow had enough options in the first set to really push it. But in set 2, boy oh boy, do we have some options. I think by now everybody knows the Tech and DJ combo. If you don't know what you can expect if your opponent has Tech in play, DJ himself will be able to flip out from his smuggle to steal one of your resources. Man, that's not good. It gets worse. When you're playing a Han leader, he can effectively destroy the resource that he steals to make it go away forever so your opponent doesn't get it back. I feel like this one interaction propelled Han into being one of the best, if not the best, premier mid-range deck in the format. Why? Because your opponent can't go late against you. It means that you don't have to go late, and you can control the pace of the game. You can play bigger drops than your opponents earlier, you can stop your opponent from getting to the part of the curve that they want to get to, and it's kind of a nightmare. Also, Han has a really good game against aggro because of his leader ability. You can start by playing a 3 instead of a 2-drop. You can start to get board control faster than your opponent can build it. First turn Millennium Falcon is going to shut down a lot of the space options that your opponent's going to be playing for the first couple of turns. Playing a first turn Ezra is just bigger than anything they can do. Playing a first turn Bodhi Rook might disrupt upgrades or certain effects that you want to have in your hand for later in the game. I feel like Yellow Han might be the most well-positioned deck in the metagame right now, and you are for sure going to see it at your next Planetary Qualifier, so I would be practicing against it right now. This is a list that was brought to us from Gen Con, and realistically, you're going to be seeing all sorts of variants of this deck. Shaving 1 or 2 cards here, different sideboards, that kind of stuff. But I would get reps in against it. This is probably what I would say is, if I'm not playing Sabine Yellow, this is the other deck I would play. I feel like in the next Planetary Qualifier that you play in, this might be your best chance to win. If you're looking for a deck straight out of the gate to net deck, you know, change a few cards here or there based on what you expect your metagame to be. But if you want to win, this is the deck I would consider pilot. And I wouldn't say that lightly. All right, the next deck that we're going to be talking about today is Boba Yellow. And this one also comes from Gen Con by a man named Bobby Colgrove. I think we all know Boba. Boba in set 1 was a menace. Boba in set 2 is a menace. I think that there are a lot more options now that can beat Boba. I don't think it is the menace that it once was. But a leader that flips on 5, that is as big as Boba is always going to be relevant and in the conversation. And I think that Boba Yellow, even in set 2, even with more options to be able to go against it, still has a chance to beat every deck in the game. Good against aggro, it's good against control, it's good against other mid-range decks. It doesn't have quite the same endgame stopping power that Han Yellow has, but most of the time you don't need to because this deck plays a little bit closer to an aggro deck than a mid-range deck anyway, leveraging the early tempo power of things like early 1-drops and 2-drops, especially with the new Mercenary Gunship. Love this card. If you don't have this card in your main deck or sideboard, you have to be asking yourself why. I believe now into really strong effects like Boba and Forlom and Zuckuss, and of course Fett's Fire Spray to end the game. I don't think we have to cover Boba Yellow too much here, other than to say the fact that it's still relevant. I wouldn't leave home without No Good To Me Deads anymore, because Boba Yellow and Han Yellow are in the format, and you need to be stopping leaders more than ever now. It was a card that I would have suggested that you don't need in the main deck in set 1, but I think is imperative to have in your deck for set 2. And the third and possibly spiciest deck on this list is Rey. Now, Rey can be built with basically any color combination that you want to in set 2. The one that I'm presenting to you today is a red version that was piloted by one of our locals to very great success lately, and it's just very interesting. This list that I have in front of you is more of an experimental list than a finished product, but I wanted to talk about Rey because it is very good, maybe exceptional, maybe even the best in the game at stopping aggro. If your meta is aggro and you want to beat aggro, this is the deck that I would be working on. Why? Moisture Farmer. Man, what a beast that card is. The first time my opponent played it, I was like, okay, Moisture Farmer. And then they used Rey's ability on it. Then they used Rey's ability on it again. And then I was looking at my board, and I said to myself, crap, what do I do? And turns out you pair that with a few defenders here and there, a few more restore characters here and there, and all of a sudden they've got an overwhelming board presence that you can't beat when you're playing aggro. And really, that's kind of what I want to accentuate about Rey Red, and really any Rey combination. But Rey Red specifically, you want to be playing for board control. The way you win against aggro and some other mid-range decks with this is just play so many restore characters that at a certain point in the game, you're healing more than they can deal damage. In the early game, you're stopping them with early sentinels. Eventually, you get to a game state that your opponent just doesn't have the reach to finish you off. Now, I think Rey suffers a little bit against control. I think that the options that we have in this deck, you can still win in the mid-range battle against them, but realistically, this does not have a lot of card economy to go late. So this deck, you're aiming to win the mid-range matchups, you're aiming to win the aggro matchups, and then you can build your sideboard into ways that might be able to fight control with pillage and hand disruption effects. The biggest reason why I think red is where I would start is because it gets to utilize the force synergy, very specifically with force throw. I think force throw is still one of the best cards in the game. That still doesn't have as much support as I would like for it, but still has one of the most powerful effects in the game. You pair that with pillage, and perhaps you can get lucky and snipe all of the good cards out of your control opponent's hands to stop them from stopping you from winning the game. But this is the deck, this is the leader that I would be bringing if you want to beat Boba Yellow, because it plays a little bit more like an aggro deck if you want to beat Kylo. There is no better leader, I feel like, currently that can deal with those decks than Rey. And if I was planning on playing in a meta like that, this is what I would bring to the tournament. Now, of course, you can try out the green, you can try out the yellow, just look at the low-cost units. That's the most important thing for all of your Rey decks. What units do I want to play that have 2 or less power that I can buff with Rey that make them more relevant? And that's a wrap on mid-range. What deck would you play? What cards would you change? Let us know in the comments below, as well as any other content you'd like to see from us in the future. As always, if you need singles, For your mid-range deck, please visit us at gamersguildaz.tcplayerpro.com. If you need booster boxes, packs, or accessories for any of your Star Wars needs, please visit us at gamersguildaz.com. Thank you for watching the video. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe. May the Force be with you for your next Planetary Qualifier. See you in the next one.